And what happens in a high milk price year or a low grain price year? All those graphs just tip over a bit further to the right. When we get into a low milk price year or tougher operating environment, they all just tip over a bit further to the left. So I just want to jump into some of the financial performance of the farmers, because some interesting stuff came out. I just want to, I guess, acknowledge that we're talking about farmers, we're not talking about commercial farms, and it's, you've got 30 cows moving around a paddock, not 300 or 400 or 500 or 1,000. So it's always a bit of difficulty in saying how much of the inherent advantage is due to the small herd size. And I did some modelling work on it where we set up the model so they actually replicate what's happened in real life. And then one of the things I had to do, I just said, well, lower maintenance requirements for cows in that small herd environment. And then so they got the model to replicate what was going on the farm once, and then said, okay, now put that maintenance back up to what it would be on a commercial farm. So just where does the energy go, basically? That was as good a way as I could think of doing it. I came to the conclusion that the advantage on a farm in that situation is about 15 kilos of milk solids per cow over the lactation. Now, I'm happy for someone to disprove that's right or that's wrong, but I reckon that was I was reasonably comfortable with the conclusion that I came to.
That'd be similar to lines. I know I spoke to a consultant. The efficiency of getting bigger runs out. And he always said it was somewhere between 300 and 500 cows, but he didn't know where it was.
There's a physical cow thing, I reckon, and then there's an operator.
Yep.
I know David Becker talks about 600 to 700 to 800 cows at the point when the key operator slips away from the coalface and goes to the office. And then he's not there seeing, smelling, touching the things that he did as a 300 cow farm, and he's relying on hopefully a family member, but quite often an employed labour so it's that stepping away, that's that point. And the other important thing there is that once you get above about 180 cows in a pasture-based dairy system, there are real no economies of scale. Because it's all about the cow, and it's all about how far the cow's going to walk, and the cow has to have the cups put on. And
that's when the efficiencies start running out.
Yeah, and so any small efficiencies you might gain, are given up by the losses in attention to detail. So we had sort of reasonable production in the first year. We sort of exceeded the top 10% benchmarks in both farmlands. In terms of pasture harvest, the first year was a setup year, and it always is a problem with farmers. The first year is to get into a steady state. So inherited cows from demo dairy that were in condition score 4 at calving, not at condition score 5 like you'd like them, and pasture cover not where you'd like it in the farmlands, and all those sort of things. So those things that happened in the first year. But still, it generated quite a respectable level of profit, both farmers. The complementary forages did quite well that year, and the ryegrass max farmer was pretty close to the benchmark figure, the orange or red column here. And the nice thing too is we're doing it at quite reasonable levels of cost of production. Not quite at top 10%, but for the startup year that was a pretty good result. Second year was the 06-07 year, which from memory was quite a tough year in the southwest. But still managed to achieve really good levels of production. So those cows, instead of calving at condition score 4, calved in condition score 4.5. So we're starting to get that more steady state system. The really interesting thing was these components. And we haven't burrowed down entirely into why that's happened, or whether it's the difference between how they were measured with herd test versus VAT results, that type of stuff. But it's significant, and it was significant all the way through the project that these cows tested very well. I don't know if anyone's been to demo dairy and seen the herds, but they're bog standard, good Holstein cows, good Australian, probably a little bit of Jersey way back in there. They're not 650 kilos, they're not 450 kilo crossbreeds, they're just good standard black and white cows that you'd be happy to own. And so we were getting really good production per cow. The complementary forages, quite impressive sort of levels of production. But that was a tough year in terms of pasture harvest. Remember, it was a very short, or much shorter growing season than average. And what it did for the complementary forages one was that we always ran out of moisture to grow the second crop. So you grow your cereal crop, and then not have enough moisture to grow or enough time to grow, or growing days to grow your brassica crop. And so it never really captured didn't take that up to a sort of a 10-tonne figure consistently, or above, relative to the complementary forages. But the thing that started to come out, we started to exceed the performance in the ryegrass max system of the benchmarks, and that was starting to be pleasing, only marginally there, but in a tough year we were still able to achieve sort of that 7 to 8% return on assets. And the other thing about it was that we're starting to trim that cost of production down. So we're starting to get into, the system was starting to come together and we're starting to see some good results. The next year it sort of went a bit better again. Again, I think we had cows in condition score 5 or a bit better at calving. Milk production came up again, it was a bit better season. And that was, from memory, the high milk price year. Now, if we look at the results we achieved, better growing season, we harvested more, and the returns were absolutely astronomical, really. And the reason being is that we maintained this output and improved the output, and in that year where the operating conditions were more favourable to produce more milk, the more highly geared up system, so the complementary forages actually exceeded the ryegrass max system. But I think the really important thing there, and the big difference, was the ability of the farmers to maintain a low cost of production. So there's that old Boyle's third law of gases, is that gases expand to the volume available. It applies to business as well, because expenditure will expand to the income available. I think it was studied out, I read somewhere about looking at milk prices around the world and cost of production. Consistently around the world, the cost of production sat at 10% below the milk price. Consistently around the world, it just expands to the income available. And so that was probably the big difference. It was this maintaining, I guess from a farmer's perspective, I don't mean this in a critical way, but probably they didn't relax. Whereas commercial farmers sort of said, phew, if I know I get the milk price I deserve, I'm going to spend a bit on that, and I'm going to maybe probably a bit more later. And the farmers kept as a farmer study, were forced to have the discipline, I guess, to say, well, I'm going to keep control of my costs. So that was the really exciting thing with that, was maintaining that low cost of production. Things don't always go perfectly on farmers, and the extra column I've got there is to highlight probably why the simple reason why the complementary forages never really consistently performed at the level we'd hoped they would. So again, we had the same stocking rate. We got the good production per cow again. That year actually was interesting. The milk solids, the condition score of the cows had been let slip a bit, so it wasn't quite as good as the year before. We were getting the milk production in the complementary forages, but we weren't getting the harvest that we're after. And that half the time, when you get them those more highly geared systems, that half the time becomes critical, because you've got to buy them. And so you've got to go out to the market and buy that. And so again, not being able to generate the total tonnage of feed that was being aimed for. And again, in that year, a really good result, probably almost 20% above the top 10% benchmarks in the ryegrass max system. And I guess as people say, well, how did you do it? Or what was the silver bullet? I'll go through it in the presentation now. I don't think, surprise, surprise, there is no silver bullet, but there's about 5 of them that all work together. They're called silver bullets. But again, maintain that low cost of production and maintain a really healthy operating margin. Even in the complementary forages, didn't get too far different to the top 10% benchmark figure. But this ryegrass max figure consistently had a high output system with a low cost of production. So a really high focus on forages, and that's what sparked the interest of the group up in the Fleurieu and Greg Mitchell's groups up there, saying, well, there's been some work done in here with on the benchmarking using Red Sky, and they looked at their cost of production and their pasture harvest and saying, surely we're not that different. Surely and what aren't we doing that the ryegrass max farm was? And so they came down, they visited the farmlets, went and saw some farms in the southwest, and that was probably the formation of the partner farm activities. I'll just quickly go through these. I mean, if you standardise them for milk price, I'm conscious of time, and I reckon I'm already about 10 slides behind. In that one, we just standardised milk price, and the message there is that there was no persuasive argument in southwest Victoria for telling farmers they should be moving away from the well-managed ryegrass system. So there was no persuasive argument in that location. But the complementary forages had to achieve some really impressive physical yields on some of its crops, and we were sort of seeing the potential for some of these other alternatives, and made us think a lot about ryegrass and why it was so good. And then say, if we're going to replace ryegrass with something, what can we replace it with that doesn't give up the strengths of ryegrass? And I'll talk a fair bit about the sort of approach we started to take
So the management for the complementary forage system though is much more intensive, and you need a high level of input on farm as far as your thinking goes.
Absolutely, and it's all about time.
Yeah.
It's all about time. When you're trying to get, and every time you try and establish a crop, you introduce a risk period where the crop establishment might fail. And we had that, dry sort of October, the turnip crop didn't grow. Dry in November, instead of getting your 8 to 10 tonne you're aiming for, you got 2.
Yeah.
Or
so the messages around high yields and strong financial performance need to be tempered with, you need a much higher level of management to be able to deliver those.
Yeah. And it's like you talk about managing different species.
Yeah.
You've got different things to manage, and it's more than that, because in ryegrass you have this body of knowledge. A lot of it sits in this conference today. That all the people you can go and say, tell me a bit about ryegrass, rotation lengths, fertiliser, species, all that type of stuff.
Neil, so given the comment that Verity raised about management, does that management actually broadly exist in order to manage that complexity?
I don't think it does. Dairy farmers, I've got a client who said to me once, I'm a really bad cropper. I said, yeah, I know, you prove it every year. You set out to almost fail every year. And because we know all about this body of knowledge that we have about perennial ryegrass and how it fits in and how we manage it with cows versus how do we grow a cereal crop. One of the activities in the 3030 project, Frank Mickham was running these forage insight groups, and there was a group down at Yarram in sort of southeast Gippsland where the rain, the loss of rain there over the 10-year drought was the equivalent to the irrigation water disappearing in northern Victoria.